Building Bridges platform, we found we had quite a bit of knowledge between ourselves to begin exploratory discussions, from law to education, from art to science, and much in between. So our ethos, for anyone who is here for the first time, is that the world is one country, humankind, with an emphasis on the kind, are the citizens of this world, and that we may liken the human world to a physical body in which everything that happens is interrelated. So, for example, if you have a bad headache, if you have a cough, whatever, it affects your whole body. And so in the world now, anything that happens in one part of the world affects us all. We've learnt this from COVID. We know this from climate change. So many areas now need to be addressed together. And so we're keen to just plant seeds, really, to have conversations to any areas that can improve our world, our societies. So this leads nicely to introducing Geoff, who is an expert in virtues and education. Geoff ran a highly successful virtues programme as head of Cahellan School here in Cornwall. He was praised by Ofsted, by modern-day philosopher Alain de Botton, no less. I love Alain de Botton's work, that's amazing. By the parents at his school and many others. I personally, I have first-hand knowledge, actually, of how excellent Geoff's programme was, because in 2011, I completed my master's degree, and my dissertation was a study at Geoff's school, looking at the virtues programme. And quite honestly, I just have to say that it was a privilege to observe children as young as 4 to 5 years old speaking the language of virtue. The older kids weren't called prefects, they were virtues ambassadors. And to see them in the playground, negotiating, creating reconciliation out of the playground fights, it was, quite honestly, it was inspiring. And I felt that these 4 to 5 years old had quite a lot to teach our world leaders. So when we say virtues, just think of character traits like perseverance, determination, kindness, compassion, basically the essence of any major faith that you will look into, and all the major philosophies from Aristotle and Confucius onwards. So virtues have an important place. One could say that they are the foundation for the betterment of our world. Whatever laws or social structures we create can only be as effective as the people in them and the virtues they practice. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Geoff. He, as I said, was headmaster of a primary school, ran the virtues programme throughout. He co-wrote a book, which I think it's up in my loft. I couldn't put my hand on it just now, Geoff. I am being decorated, so that's why. But a book on virtues education, which is a great book, a handbook for parents and children. He was headhunted by the Breakfast TV, BBC, to participate in an interview centering around his work. He has also worked with the Centre for Character Education at Birmingham University and presented papers on his work at Oxford University. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Geoff. Geoff has got to do all the work tonight because he's also the host of this meeting. So after he has, delivered his presentation, obviously we would welcome comments, questions, and any thoughts from all of you. So over to you, Geoff.
Oh, thank you very much, Phil. And lovely to see everybody and see some old friends here. I'd also like to welcome my virtues colleague, Bev Fitzgerald Bevington, who worked at the school with me and was a real mine of ideas. And she's a virtues facilitator and probably more up to date with virtues now than me, as I retired from my school. But, there she is. Give them a wave, Bev, so they know who you are. And do chip in, Bev, if you want to add anything as I go through the evening. So I'm just going to talk generally about virtues, what they are, and then later on I'll share some of the strategies that we used at school with the short film and some of the strategies. And virtues is not just limited to children; it applies to adults as well, and so it's all age ranges. But the age range that I'm familiar with is primary school. So and it's lovely to see that there's some educators here as well. It makes me a little bit nervous, but here we go. I'm going to start anyway. So Phil's already done this, but I'm a former head teacher, and I'm a founder member of the UK Association of Character Education based at Birmingham University, and I wrote the primary character curriculum, which was commissioned by Birmingham University, and I've also written the Rising Stars character programme, also for primary schools. So okay, so I'm going to start this. So, well, I live in Cornwall, like Phil and like Bev, and if you're lucky enough to have visited Cornwall, you'll see these old ruins on the cliff tops, and the old tin mines, and I'm very fond of them, and you can go and picnic at them, and they link to virtues because, and I find they link to education because under the surface, of course, back in the day, the miners were working in the dark. And toiling away for very little financial reward, a bit exploited, and this always reminded me of the station of teachers, really. But like the miners, teachers and parents, perhaps you come across the odd gem, and of course the miners would find these uncut, unpolished gems in the dark, probably covered in muck and dirt. And they wouldn't look anything to the untrained eye, but to the trained eye of the miner would see the potentiality there of these unpolished gems. And, the miner would know that in the hands of a skilled jeweler, once they've been faceted and polished, these gems, that's the same gem, by the way, the value becomes apparent to anybody. And this always reminded me of how it is with schools and parents, because part of our job is to see these potentialities in children, and to the process of education is to bring these things out, isn't it? To strengthen them and acknowledge them. But just going back to the natural world, human beings have been very good at finding potential and bringing it out in the natural world, not just the mineral world, but the animal world. So here's one of my favourite examples, which is the wolf. And back in the day, when we were hunter-gatherers, I guess, or when we first domesticated cattle, the wolf was our enemy. We encroached on his territory, and we characterised the wolf's behaviours as, aggression towards us. The wolf was characterised by his cunning, as you know from fairy tales and stories. It's the big bad wolf and Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf is a cunning character, isn't he? He's able to outwit human beings, and of course he has this amazing pack mentality where they all work together for the good of the pack, and it's a formidable enemy. Now, I'm not in any way saying that wolves are evil or anything like that. They're actually wonderful creatures, aren't we? We know they're really valuable to the environment, so it's just the way that we view them, but for themselves, all their behaviours are not really negative at all. It's just the way that wolf is. But from the point of view of humans, we saw them as their behaviours as very negative. But it's interesting, isn't it? I wonder who was the first person that thought about domesticating a wolf cub. And I bet it was probably a woman, wasn't it, around a campfire one night, who saw the potentiality there, that these qualities could be transformed into the domestic dog. So the aggression that we saw in the wolf becomes protectiveness. That aggression has become protectiveness for us. The dogs protect us, don't they? We see that the cunning of the wolf has become the understanding that animals can show. They're able to respond to us, to help us. And my dog's lovely. If you're feeling a bit down, she'll come up and make a fuss of you, and she seems to understand if you're feeling a bit under the weather. And of course, that pack mentality becomes the loyalty that these animals show to us. So it's interesting, isn't it, how these qualities, human beings have been able to take them and refine them and make of these perceived negatives something positive. Now, so Phil referred to these qualities, didn't she? Loyalty, understanding, kindness, compassion as virtues. And here's a list of the virtues here. And as Phil mentioned, the first written record we've got of virtues is the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who who talked about arete as the Greek for virtue. And Aristotle's philosophy was that human beings could only flourish if they learnt and developed virtues, and that if you got enough virtues, practiced enough of them, you would flourish. You have this thing called phronesis, and you'd gain wisdom through virtues. So there they are. So I presume that if you know anybody that you admire or you think has a good character or is a very upright, wonderful person, they probably demonstrate some of these virtues, don't they? Some people refer to them as values, but that values tend to be what people value. So people can value being an individual, or the American dream, or work hard, play hard, and they're very much culture specific. But virtues are very universal all over the world. Doesn't matter who you are. You could be a gangster, you could be a saint, you could be a prime minister. But if you go, say, for an operation, you'd want your surgeon to practice excellence. You'd want him to practice cleanliness. If you get into trouble with the law, you hope that you're going to be shown some justice and some forgiveness and all these sorts of things. So they're very, very universal. So in my school, I used animals as little archetypes, really, because and for me particularly, these four animals, the wolf cub, the sheepdog puppy, the lamb, and the hedgehog, I hope you can recognize what they are. They for me represented little archetypes of child characters and adults, to be honest, that I would come across. So imagine this is your first class that you're getting. You're a teacher, and this is the first class, a new class, if you like. I wonder if you can just take a moment to imagine what challenges these characters are going to present you with. I'll start again with the wolf. I used to call this character Ruffkin Gruffkin, and you'll see him later in the little video. But he's interesting because I love this character. I love him dearly because he's a rough diamond, really. He's the one that's a bit dominant in the class. He's the one the other children will be complaining that he plays too rough. That he takes over everything, and he's very boisterous. And going back to Aristotle said that wherever you get a strong positive quality, like a virtue, you get it wherever you get a strong positive quality, and Ruffkin Gruffkin's got a strong positive virtue there, which I'll reveal in a moment. But Aristotle said it's surrounded by two vices. So I'll show the vices first, and then we'll find the virtue in the middle. So he's reckless. I don't know if you've got dogs, because I don't suppose anybody's got a wolf, have they? But my dog is if you let her off the lead at night when a lorry's going down the road, she'll chase the lorry down the road. And so it's reckless, she's very reckless. And little Ruffkin Gruffkin here, I suppose he likes to climb trees that are too big for him, jump off high walls, dodge in and out of the traffic. It's not really a quality you want a child to have, is it? Recklessness. And on the other hand, the other extreme is dogs can be quite cowardly, can't they? If they see another dog on a lead, they'll have a go. My dog will have a go at another dog if it's on the lead, or if my dog sees another dog behind a garden gate, she'll be all kind of having a go and rough and tough. And the wolf, I guess, sort of hunts in a pack. It's a sort of as they'll take down one animal on its own, and they work together as a pack. So I'm roughly characterizing these things just as an example, really. But our job as educators is just find the middle ground. That's like a continuum, isn't it? Recklessness to cowardice, it's like a continuum. So if we can moderate that into the middle, the virtue that we find hiding there, well, would anybody like to guess what it might be, the virtue that's hiding there? Go on, practice your courageousness. Yeah, it's courage. Okay, not too reckless, not too cowardly, but courage is the virtue that's hiding in between those two extremes. Let's look at another example. Our little hedgehog character. I once travelled to India to a school in Lucknow to give a talk about virtues for a character conference, and I wondered if it was a very heavily built up area, and I wondered if they know what a hedgehog was, you know, but they all seem to recognize this character in children. They seem to know what hedgehogs was. I think there's a Himalayan hedgehog, but they recognize these hedgehog characters in children because they can be very prickly, sort of oversensitive, if you like. And on the other extreme, they can be uncaring. You know, if somebody's too sensitive and gets upset, then they build up a tough, an outer sort of shell, don't they? That protects them. So on one extreme they can be prickly and oversensitive, and the other end they can be uncaring. So I'm sure you've all come across children like this that, you know, you only say something minor to them, they curl up into a ball or get upset for no apparent reason. But because these little characters, it's often because I always used to make a joke about the hedgehog that, you know, he'd lost a lot of his family on the roads. You know, he's got a flat mate, and you know, he's had a lot of suffering. But because of that suffering that he's undergone, his primary virtue is empathy. So there's empathy nestled away between those two extremes, those two negative traits, if you like, is empathy. So again, it's all on a spectrum, isn't it? One end is oversensitivity, and the other end is uncaring, callousness, if you like, and in the middle is that empathic nature, which we try to hopefully guide children towards. And then last example I'm going to use is a character that's beloved of teachers everywhere. I say jokingly. This is the child at school that you know, when you catch them doing something wrong, you say, "Why did you do that?" And they say, "Well, they were doing it." You know, and they feel that's an excuse for them. Somebody else was doing that. They were only doing what someone else was doing. This is a little character that wants to be in uniformity. They want everybody to dress the same way. They want to eat the same things as everybody else. They want to watch the same film, read the same books. They don't want to stand out. They want to hide in this uniformity, and they want everybody to be the same. I suppose that's the negative extreme. On the other end of the spectrum is isolation. They don't do well on themselves. They don't do well on their own. They become quite isolated easily because they have insufficient individuality to be able to be a kind of independent character in a way. So those two extremes there, uniformity on one end and isolation on the other one. And of course, well, would anybody like to guess what the virtue might be hiding in between those two extremes? Anybody want to?
Confidence.
Well,
loyalty.
Getting close. It's a tricky one to find, isn't it? But essentially,
compliance.
Oh, sorry. I missed you there, Sandra. Sorry. The hidden virtue there is unity. You know, it's unity is the virtue there. And either extreme, you know, if you go to the extreme with unity, it's everybody the same, isn't it? And at the other extreme, is everybody in isolation. You know, if you don't, so the key virtue there that the lamb possesses or the sheep possesses is unity. So I would see in these children that you know, although we value individuality and we want people to be individuals, but what was great about these characters is they wanted, when you looked at them in a positive light, their virtue of unity, they wanted everybody to be part of the same flock. They were very good at welcoming people in. They wanted the people to be in unity. So, you know, that was a way of seeing the positive traits of these little characters. So I suppose my main point is that when we're with children, what we immediately see often is the challenging traits. We don't see these lovely virtues. We see all these challenges, and it's a key part of the virtues approach to be able to see these virtues in hiding in the characters that you encounter, particularly in teaching. Okay, so here's a little exercise for you all. Then here's an example. We all feel sorry for the mouse, of course. It's a cat in front of a mouse hole, in case you can't see very well. But I'll give you a couple of minutes. What virtues then is the cat displaying?
Patience.
Patience, excellent. Yes, patience.
Optimism.
Optimism, perhaps, yes. Any other takers? Oh.
Curiosity.
Curiosity, yes.
Goal orientated.
Yeah, goal oriented. Yeah, well, I suppose you call that determination, would you? Focus, all these different things.
Confidence.
He's confident that if he waits there long enough, he's going to get himself a nice mouse for his tea. Assertiveness, I guess it could be. Yeah, he's asserting himself over his territory. Yeah, okay, very good. Let me go on to the. Here we go. Here's another little character, one of my favourites. So, any takers for what virtues this little chap is showing?
Hopefulness.
Hopefulness, yeah, hope. He's full of hope.
Appreciation, I said.
Appreciation, yeah, appreciation.
Self-discipline.
Self-discipline, yeah. I don't know how long his self-discipline is going to last.
Friendliness.
I'm sorry, who was that, Pete?
Friendliness.
Friendliness, yes. Caring. I don't. Well, if he eats your biscuit, I don't know how caring. If he's showing, he obviously cares for himself.
Hopeful.
Yeah. Sorry.
Hopeful.
Hopeful. Yes. Hopeful.
Maybe loyalty. Maybe his owner or friend has said, "Not for you quite yet."
Yeah. So a bit of maybe self-discipline, perhaps.
No, desire.
Yeah. Desire, but he's.
Obedience. Wait.
Obedience. Yeah. Okay, so I found these animal characters were wonderful for kind of just getting a handle on what virtues were, and it's just a fun way of seeing virtues, really. So, how do we polish these? Going back to the mind, how do we polish these gems of virtues in people that we see in other people? Well, I'm going to share a video that I commissioned, this little video just before I retired from my school, and it features my dear friend Bev at Key Helen School, and is talking a little bit about virtues, and hopefully gives you a little bit of context to virtues in an educational setting. So I think it's from my memory, it's only about 4 minutes long, this film, so not too long. Okay, the gems within. Here we go now. So this was filmed at Key Helen School, which is a small Cornish primary school, and we had a regular program of virtues, which is still running, which Bev runs and probably is developed and made even better now. But we focused on a virtue every 2 weeks, and we had many strategies around how we spoke to the children. So this gives us a little overview of those strategies and life at school running the Virtues Project. Here we go.
Our schools and lives can be challenging and full of pressure. Just like plants that need water, most of us are thirsty for meaningful recognition and encouragement. Overused words such as well done and good boy or good girl don't quench that thirst or offer anything meaningful. They don't tell a child what it is that they've done well. If a child holds the door open, instead of just saying thank you, I'll say thank you for showing courtesy. If they're working hard on a subject, we can highlight the virtue that they're demonstrating. For instance, you've been working for over 40 minutes on this. You're showing great determination. These qualities of determination, honesty, resilience, kindness and compassion are known as virtues. By identifying a virtue in a child and naming it, you will see their eyes light up in recognition. Boys and girls, I've been having some problems with Gruffkin. He's been flooding the toilets again. You know, he likes to turn the taps on and put paper towels in the plug holes, and then water goes everywhere. He's not practicing his virtues, is he? Can you tell me what virtues he does need to practice?
Helpfulness.
Yes, okay. What would be helpful to do?
Not stack things down the plugs.
Yeah, it's not helpful at all, is it, to other people? How do you feel when you go in and the sinks are all flooded?
You won't be able to wash your hands, and you might have really dirty hands. I just wanted to wash my hands. Why do people do this?
What virtue do you think he needs to be practicing?
Obedience.
Obedience. Okay. What, to the rules?
Yeah,
Okay.
so if the teacher says, don't do that again, and you need to listen to that and not do it again.
We use the language of virtue to set boundaries and expectations before we undertake anything.
We all think differently and we all see something different. So we just need to respect everyone around us and the equipment that's up there, that we've laid up there. Right. Anything else we can think of? Any other virtues? Any other gems?
In all aspects of life, the first thing we need is communication, and to communicate effectively. So it's really important that children understand why we do things, what makes us have unity, peacefulness, cooperation in the world. So when we sort of plant the seeds, they discover that they've got all of these already in them, and it allows them to just shine and shine. So, you know, when you speak to someone, you say, oh, thank you for showing such peacefulness in resolving that. They already know that they're in a win-win situation, and we know that they have just allowed a virtue gem to shine.
All children contain the gems of character. One of the key purposes of education should be to identify these gems, polish them and bring them out sparkling into the light for all to see. When we become fluent in this nurturing language of virtue, we can use it in many powerful ways. We guide children to the virtues needed in any situation. Anxiety grows unless children are aware that the challenges of life are opportunities to develop and strengthen their own virtues and character qualities. The language of virtue helps us to guide, praise and correct children as they grow and learn.
It's lovely to see Bev there. So you got to see her on location. She was such a wonderful support with all of the virtues work. I've come to the end of the first part, I guess, which is just giving you an overview of what virtues are. And I thought might be a nice moment if you had any questions or thoughts. I can certainly go on for a bit longer and talk about a bit more in depth about strategies. It may be that Bev wants to add something, but if you have any questions about what we've talked about so far, I'm more than happy to bat some things about for a little bit. If there's no questions, I'll proceed a bit more with some more of the slides and talk.
Thank you so much, Geoff. And we've just had a comment that from Sandra that she wishes you were her son's head teacher. So thank you very much, Geoff. Wonderfully inspiring presentation. I've got a million questions myself, but let's start with everybody. Sandra, do you want to ask a question to start off with?
Yes, I was wondering whether this program what is on offer, not just to primary schools, but perhaps at high schools as well, and whether either Bahá'í-led or just by anyone who wished to use this in a guidance type, in the guidance. I think you have guidance in the schools here. That's what we used to have when I was a teacher back in South Africa. We had this a class called guidance where we talked about this, but nothing so overt and really I thought that was great, and I thought the language that you used was amazing. So and if not, how could this be something that would gain momentum? How could we get it to gain momentum?
Such a big question. I mean, I was the Virtues Project was originally founded in North America by a child psychologist and therapist called Linda Cavellin-Popoff. Her and her brothers and husband were very worried about the rise of gang violence in North American schools, and it was so popular that it spread to all sorts of different adult groups. Everything from Alcoholics Anonymous to Native American reservations, and they looked at the wisdom from all over the world, from native cultures to religions to philosophies to everything to locate these character qualities. Bev and I adapted it really in the school, and so a lot of ideas that we came up with are not actually in the original Virtues Project, but the kind of mechanisms and the sort of ideas and Bev's just come up with something called a Virtues Gonk, which I'm going to see tomorrow in Camborne Church. So I'm really excited about that. But it's certainly available in the States. There's not a huge amount of practitioners in Britain. I can talk to you later on, Sandra, about how we might help sort of get it into secondary schools. What I can say is that character education is becoming more popular in the UK. Many different ways of doing it, and I'm on the board of the Association of Character Education, and they have a kite marking system, and they provide materials for schools to be able to access to generate their own forms of character education. And there isn't one set method. I'm very interested in virtues, but I can talk to you later about that, Sandra. It's quite a detailed sort of area to get into. Please chip in, Bev, if you want to say anything.
Yeah, I was about to say that most of the colleges have a sort of a mini character education thing, and there's some dispute at the moment, which is quite interesting because they want more and more Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 to be able to access this, just like we have like down here in the Southwest in our primary schools. If anyone is interested in virtues and working with it, there is actually a series of talks given by some really wonderful people at the moment, and there's a course that can be done. But in the UK, we have the virtues. We have a virtues network, so I could give you the link to that, and you could ask someone near your area to come in and just chat with you if you like.
Thanks, Bev.
Thank you, Bev. I think it was Violette next, followed by Steve. Violette?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I was going to follow on from what the previous speaker said. I knew the Virtues Project through Bahá'í children's classes on a Sunday, like Sunday school, or elements of that were sort of brought in education, mainstream education, in sort of little pockets like PSE, personal and social education or something. And it was just so good to see how it actually permeated the whole school ethos. And of course, you were at an advantage that Geoff, as a head, you could just say, well, this is how it's going to work. And in the introduction, Philomena, you said that the parents were very much on board. How did the teachers feel bringing in this project and them having to follow, really, because it was in every aspect of school life?
I can see that Bev would like to address this. So thanks for your enthusiasm, Bev, and support being here with us. So over to you.
Well, certainly at Key-Helen and throughout the Academy Trust, they have adopted what we have at Key-Helen, and right across the board, all the teachers, all the heads and stuff are really interested in virtues. From our marking system, each school has something like just 3 main rules, but every fortnight we have a different virtue. And say, for instance, our rules are to be ready, to be respectful, and to be safe. And then we use the virtues each time to show how we can make sure that we are respectful, we are safe, and we are ready. And it just goes on. Absolutely no teacher wants to deviate away from the virtues because it's a simple language that is universal. And as Geoff had said at the beginning, our 4-year-olds and the 11-year-olds know it. The teachers, it just flows off the tongue. And those schools within the Academy Trust who hadn't heard about the virtues before have all adopted it. So that's how it goes.
Thank you, Bev.
Over to Steve next. Next question.
This is again a question, really, which either Beverly or Geoff might want to answer, which is how have parents reacted, and have you managed to, if you like, give children who didn't feel that they had much confidence or tended to be, say, a little challenging, etc., to give them a more moderate and happy life. So parents, and also a few examples without naming names would be really interesting.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll address this, and again, chip in, Bev, if you want to. But parents would come to our school because they appreciate the virtues, and seemed to it got a good reputation very quickly. So parents came; they were very interested. And the thing that I found really interesting is that when you talk to adults generally, people don't agree on an awful lot. We don't agree on what's the best kind of food to eat, do we? Some of us are meat eaters, vegetarians, vegans. We all drink different things. We all like different types of music, But one thing I found universal agreement on was virtues. So at our little Cornish school, we had a mix of people. Say there'd be some people from the farming community, and their values were, working hard and earning your money and, putting in a good day's work and, tending to the land. And then we'd have some artistic people, Cornwall's full of artists, isn't it? And their values were very much individualism and expression and, I thought very crudely kind of characterizing it, of course. And then there were just ordinary working, not ordinary, but, people who did all those amazing things that keep us going, emptied the bins and, caterers and, street cleaners and shop workers, everybody, very, very different backgrounds, but that everybody, doesn't matter what background you're from, everybody wants to be respected. We're all kind of exquisitely aware of if we're being respected by another human being, aren't we? So when you talk about respect, it's universally understood. Even the gangster rappers love it, don't they? That's the big thing. They want to be respected. They don't want to be dissed. And it's just such a universal thing. So parents immediately get it. They get it. But what I discovered was that it doesn't matter whether somebody's got a university education or no education at all. Their children run rings around them, and I've seen the most, highly educated people having a meltdown in Asda or Marks and Spencer's, with their children running rings around them. They're completely frustrated. I love that program, Motherland. Just all these professional parents are just absolutely at their wits' end with children, because nobody's given the kind of manual to talk to children. And as I mentioned in the film, many parents, they're on this because we're not educated in virtues language. We'll say, when we want to praise our children, we'll say things like, well done, good boy, or you're a star, that's fantastic. And we don't have the kind of, so when a child brings their picture to show us, it's, well done, it's a star, it's amazing. It's, we lack the kind of the virtues language to be able to say, I really admire your creativity, or when a child's afraid about something, we're perhaps trying to fix it rather than saying, maybe you should practice, maybe you could choose here to practice the virtue of courage. They don't have those kind of nuances in their language so parents really, really valued having that. Sorry, I've gone on. Bev, did you want to chip in on anything at all?
I'm just reiterating what you say, Geoff. But for example, at our school, we have some young people. I mean, the pandemic has made it so difficult for their confidence, and leaving their parents, it's a big wrench. They're coming into school, they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know if at 11 o'clock we're going to say we're closing school. And it's a huge negative impact on a lot of young people. So coming in school, and they're holding on to their parents, not because they don't like us at school, because they're afraid of what's happening in the world. And I can just sort of agree with them, and I say, okay, then, well, I can see that you are feeling a bit apprehensive, and I can see that you're trying to find your courage. What other virtue can keep your company today? And they will tell me, and the parents would chip in and say, and you know what, Miss Bev, he showed so-and-so yesterday, and we could congratulate the young person on that. Give them time to find the courage that they've got and the virtue that's going to keep them going, say just until break time. And then by break time, they'll see me and they say, oh, I'm all right now. And, that sort of thing. And it's really welcoming that the parents talking to us and using the language of virtue at the same time as their children.
Kath, I know you're waiting. I'm just going to go to Nazanin because Nazanin asked if she could see some examples of virtues language to encourage children to find themselves and their potential. So I'm just going to go back to my PowerPoint keynote and share some language. These were kind of like crib sheets that I provided, generated for teachers at school. So when we were teaching the virtue of patience, using the language, school is an amazing, you need patience all the time in school, don't you? So we provided some little sentences that could be used for each year group by suggested sentences, suggested language, so that teachers could guide children when they needed to practice a virtue. They could praise them when they saw them practicing a virtue, and they could correct them if they weren't practicing the virtue. So here we go in kindergarten, or pre-key stage 1, if you like, the very first year in school. So a teacher might say, remember to be patient, don't rush or overtake. And when she sees the children waiting, or he, sees the children waiting, a teacher might say, you're waiting so patiently, well done. Thank you for being patient and waiting for me to pick you. And then when children are, as they want to do, call out in class, a teacher might say, to correct them, would say, don't call out, remember, I want to see you practice patience. So language all the time is trying to draw the children back to the virtues. Year 1 and year 2, okay, be patient, it will soon be your turn to speak. Please wait patiently, your turn will come. And then perhaps when a teacher sees a child who's not calling out or shouting out, that they might say, Phil, I can see your patience because you're not interrupting or talking. I'm going to pick you for this activity because I can see your patience in the way you are sitting. Okay. On to years 4, 5 and 6. So, you can see the theme coming here, can't you? So I'm not going to read all those through, but there's some examples of virtues language. Okay. So again, so the three modes that a teacher has are the teacher guides, the teacher praises or acknowledges, and the teacher corrects. Okay, and of course parents have that, parents have those 3 kind of modes as well in the way they interact with their own children. You guide your children, you praise them or acknowledge them, and you correct them if they're not doing the right thing or you're worried about something that they're doing. Okay, so I'm going to stop and go to Kath. Kath, did you...
Well, you have addressed some of the things. What I'm just really surprised about is how little I know about this language of virtues, because I found it really difficult when you were asking us to choose one out of the extremes, to pick one. And you're right, it is a skill, and we do need to be taught this, how to spot virtues rather than the negative stuff. And I don't ever remember being praised for a particular virtue at all at school, and so it is. I find it very difficult to pick a virtue or to compliment people, that kind of thing, and it is a skill that we need to teach and learn.
Well, that's such a good point, Kath. Isn't it extraordinary that we find it so hard to find the virtues language? And when I think the reason is because every day in school, children will do, at least in primary school, they'll do an hour of mathematics. They'll do an hour of literacy each day. So children will know all about adjectives, verbs, digraphs, phonemes, all the kind of essentials of language. And they'll do that day in and day out. And they'll do the same with mathematics. They'll know the names of the angles. They'll know the names of the different equations that they might use. But how many times did they get a lesson on truthfulness? How many of you ever had a lesson on truthfulness? I guess some of you might have heard the Boy Who Cried Wolf, or you might have watched... Well, when my wife and I were looking for stories that exemplified truthfulness, we could only find The Boy Who Cried Wolf, Pinocchio. That was the only things we could find. And The Boy Who Cried Wolf is a fantastic story. But given how important truthfulness is to us as adults, how difficult it is to be truthful in some situations, it's quite... We don't get any lessons on it. And so we learn about, we learn it's important to tell the truth, but we never get a lesson in tactfulness. We never get the chance to practice it. So that was one of the things that I was keen on and Bev was keen on, is that we would let children role play being tactful. How do you tell your best friend that his breath is very smelly today? or your good friend says, "How do you like my new hairdo?" and you think it's terrible, and somehow how do you tell them tactfully without hurting their feelings? It's great fun to practice. Children would howl with laughter. We'd all howl with laughter but we don't. So that's why we don't have this fluency in virtues language. We don't know what the difference is between honesty and truthfulness. Don't ask me. I still don't know what the difference is. But and of course, virtues they were dispensed with in the Victorian era. I think people thought they were religious. And I must stress that the Virtues Project isn't religious. It isn't tied to any religion. But, take mathematics, for instance. Now, I'm going to ask you this question. Why do we practice mathematics?
Is that for all of us or for Kathy?
Well, I wonder. It's a tricky question, isn't it? Yeah, go on, Steve.
Construction, creativity, design of anything, making clothes, making recipes, buying things.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. That's good.
I suppose it develops a part of our brain which perhaps just language doesn't. So, yes, it focuses on a certain part of our brain. And in a way, then you can draw parallels. The virtues kind of focus on our emotional and spiritual well-being and that part of the brain.
Thanks, Viola. All these things are undoubtedly true, but I suppose I'm searching for a kind of a unifying virtue. And Bev, you're not allowed to answer.
I think
Bev's very good. I'm going to go to Bev for the answer, but
no.
Go on, Bev.
Logic.
It's okay. One of our foster child's here, and he's laughing because I'm not allowed to answer.
Go ahead, Bev, please do.
No, I mean, it's probably not the answer you have got, but one of the things is we've all agreed since time that within mathematics, we have a direct structure, whereas language is totally evolving, but we have agreed, units of measurement, we have agreed. So we take mathematics to be true. Is that right? We take things
Bev,
like
the trouble is you're too intelligent for me. I can't keep up with you. Your brain
Yes, that's not tactful.
Absolutely. What I had in mind was, of course, is that like Steve said, mathematics helps you to make clothes and do cookery. But of course, you can do those things without mathematics. You can make clothes without mathematics. You can cook food without mathematics. It just won't be that good. And the key reason that we practice mathematics is so that we can do things with excellence. If you're going to build something, you use mathematics, you can get accuracy and high tolerance. If you build a machine or an engine, you have to calculate things to the nth degree and millimeter, and you get machines that work functionally. And I'm sure Phil Koeman, with his wonderful, beautiful furniture, must use quite accurate measurements sometimes in these very flowing organic forms that he has. He must use mathematics to achieve the excellence that he gets. So mathematics helps us to do whatever we do with excellence, and excellence is a virtue, something we all value. The other thing, of course, is that when you're a child and you're in grade 1 or 2 and you're given the round shapes and the pizzas, and you're told, your teacher cuts it in half and says, "This is 2 halves. You have one, Fred has one," and of course this is about sharing in a fair way. Mathematics allows us to give people their fair shares. It allows us to do things with balance and justice. So I'm not saying those are all the virtues that mathematics has, but can you see that mathematics, it was a revelation for me, I think for Bev too. Well, Bev's done a whole kind of paper on it, but mathematics has a moral component that just gets filtered out in school. We don't even talk about it as this kind of virtues ethic going on in mathematics. Anyway, over to you, Kath. You've waited very patiently.
I think Kathy's already asked, have you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Yeah.
Philip has a question, Phil, and followed by Sandra again. So, Phil, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just want to turn this round. So how does teaching virtues affect your own attitudes and behaviour as teachers and human beings?
Yeah.
What does it teach you?
Well,
and that's to Bev as well.
Yeah. I'll just answer briefly, and I'm going to go to my the thing that it did for me. I think was it put the joy back into teaching for me, and it was really I do like this image because it's a kind of desiccated sort of desert-like image, and my wife says that some people are like this inside, emotionally, and their life they get so little acknowledgement and recognition that they become desiccated inside. And when we so at some point, almost every child, youth, and adult feels parched for meaningful recognition. So when we're saying to a child, good boy, well done, here's a red star, go out to break time, awesome, that isn't really meaningful recognition. And those kind of things get quickly degraded in the child's mind. But when we see a child, when we recognize a virtue in a child, when we say to that child, I see your courage, I see the caring that you showed for Jenny when she fell over, thank you for your helpfulness, you helped me in with the books of the classroom, or you showed great determination when you completed your project. When we identify that virtue in the child, we're not praising them, we're praising their virtue. And the child what I found is the children instinctively respond to it, just like a plant needing water. So when we identify a virtue in a child and naming it, you see children's eyes light up in recognition of their own value. And of course we can do it with adults as well. I mean, during lockdown, my wife and I made a point of giving people thank you cards in the local shops for staying open during lockdown. And, sometimes it would just reduce people to tears, that you acknowledging them for their courage in having their little post office shop open, during quite a scary time, or being of service, through lockdown. Because people just aren't used to it in our society. So for me as a teacher, Phil, it kind of gave me an emotional connection with my work. It gave me a great joy, and it was wonderful that parents deeply appreciated you seeing their children as human beings, worthy of this recognition. So that's what it did for me. It kind of put the humanity back into teaching for me, anyway. So over to Bev. I don't know what Bev's going to share. Bev, over to you for your.
For me, it's something similar. It's all about the humanness of teaching. It's letting a young person know that it's not the 3 R's, but there is preparing them to be a world citizen. And for me, every time I manage to do that, inside I grow a bit. My patience grow one, I always joke that I have 1 moment more patient than any child I have to work with. That's my goal. 1 ounce more love than anything. And so for me, as an educator, I really like the idea of the children just constantly growing. And like the other day, our virtue at the moment, I'll just tell you quickly, is joyfulness. But to have a 6-year-old tell you the difference between happiness and joyfulness is amazing. So that shows that they are having, and this young person finds it difficult to do their number bonds to 10, but they can tell you the difference between what is happiness and what is joy. And it's so profound. And so to see these young people developing the skills to be world citizens, and not just citizens that can do maths and English and stuff like that, but connect with the world, this gives me joy. This makes me happy.
Eb, can you tell us the difference?
Yes.
Yeah, well, according to one 6 year, 7 year, happiness stops when the fun stops. But joy is when they know that they are having a hard time and it's not as bad because their friend is there for them. And they said to me that happiness comes at you and the joy comes out of you. Why didn't we know that before? and I was like, okay. Yeah, so that's all the thing. It's these little things, and they go, and it's so sophisticated, the language, but they already get it, and we are still learning it. So as I say, for every moment I'm with them, there's a learning. It's a learning. It's a learning thing for me. So yeah.
That's the most wonderful definition, Bev. That's fantastic.
Yeah, happiness comes at you. Yeah. And joy comes out of you.
Out of the mouth of babes.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So question from Sandra again. And
Oh, hi. I was just commenting on maths, and the one thing that I think is the key characteristic of anything that it has a enduring value is that it's universal. And maths is a universal language. We know that it's a maths underlines just about anything. And in the same way, virtues is a universal language because it's the language of love that Baha'u'llah teaches us. And it enables us to communicate with any individual across geographies, across cultures, across points of view. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Phil's posted about Socrates' view of maths, and of course it's absolutely true what you've said. I guess the point that interests me is that we've removed the touchy-feely part of mathematics. We've made it this abstract, but it actually has moral application, doesn't it? It's a useful tool for our morality and for our caring for other people. And of course, if you're going to be an anaesthetist or a surgeon, you're going to need mathematical skills, aren't you, to keep people alive? And we sometimes forget that, don't we, with mathematics? So I'm just going to move, because Phil brought up Socrates, so this is where my chance to get all intellectual on you now. And yeah, so would anybody like to take a guess at what this is? Give you a moment or two.
It's a zygote.
A zygote. Is that Dr. Kath?
Yeah.
Dr. Kath. What is a zygote, Kath?
It's the first part of the embryo.
Yeah. Amazing, isn't it? Yeah, it's a human embryo. This is, yeah. And from the little that I've read about Aristotle, who's our first source on the virtues, Aristotle, of course, got his information from Plato, and Plato got it from Socrates, or maybe Aristotle was a student of Socrates as well, of course. But anyway, from the little I've read of Aristotle, what he seems to be saying is that everything in nature, every living thing, maybe everything, not just living things, but it's a kind of bundle of potentialities. Whatever you look at is a bundle of potentialities. And we talked about that in the beginning, how human beings see the potentialities in minerals in the ground, and how we've seen the potentialities in plants and animals that we've domesticated. And now we're looking at this zygote, and I'm sure that those of you that have had children will know that even if you have identical twins, they're very different in the way they develop very different characters. And I've had 4 children myself. They've all developed very, very different personalities and character qualities, and it's I feel to some extent that those things are kind of preloaded like a tin mine. And of course the phrase that some of you will be familiar, the quotation, regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value, is partly why I use the analogy of the tin mine. So there's this zygote, all this potentiality is within it, and but what's going to release it? What's going to release it? The physicality, of course, good food, safety, all these things. But in terms of that child finding their character qualities, the qualities that are going to make them determined, persevering, compassionate, loving, just, assertive, creative. What's going to bring those qualities to the surface? Of course, I feel it's virtues language that releases the potentiality that Aristotle thought was within human beings. And he was very, as I mentioned before, Aristotle said that if human beings are to flourish, then they need to be able to develop virtues. When they develop lots of virtues, those virtues kind of combine together to form wisdom in human beings. When we look at the zygote, we've been taught to believe that, of course, everything's coded in the genetic code for how we develop and live. But from what I've been reading recently, scientists are now starting to think that actually, when you see those cells in the zygote, they all contain the same DNA. And somehow the cells, there is this theory that the cells work together to instruct the DNA to create the amino acids that the body needs to develop forms and things like that. So this amazing sort of potentiality is kind of held in the kind of the connection of all these different cells, everything working together. It's vastly more complicated than just DNA sort of providing the kind of the coding for our bodies. I think scientists are moving away from that now. It's a bit more complex than that. For the moral structure of a human being, their development, their mental health, their creativity, and all those things, it's the virtues language. So when we see sometimes, you know, when you have a child or even with adults, you don't see these positive qualities. You often see challenging negative traits, and it's part of our task, I think, to see those as the diamonds in the rough, as the potentiality in the same way we've seen it in nature and the physical world. You know, we need to sort of be on our just like my little wolf character, Ruffkin Gruffkin. You know, he's a rough diamond. You just need to look below the surface, and some of his negative qualities are actually virtues in hiding.
Can I perhaps say there, Geoff, that I came at the virtues from like a different angle from Geoff and Bev, because the students I was teaching were much older, and as Geoff said, he'd lost, you know, you lose the joy in your job, and I had lost the joy in my job big time. I was teaching students in colleges of further education. They were unmotivated a lot of the time. They discipline problems, bad behaviour, you know, all the rest of it. And then I ended up studying the virtues, did a dissertation on it, went to Geoff's school. And I did think, oh, well, this is all very well. This is fine for primary kids, but how am I going to apply this to my job? But I can't tell you how well it worked. It worked like magic. And I was teaching profoundly deaf students for whom abstract language is a challenge, you know, to say the least. So I was kind of thinking, oh, well, I'll have to water down, you know, perhaps, you know, redefine the, you know, the virtues, the language and all the rest of it. Not a bit of it. We had a chart in the department with all the virtues listed. And as Kathy said, we're not familiar with them. We're not familiar with them enough to be able to use them. So we put them up there. So when a student arrived late, as they often did, rather than kind of growling and saying, oh, you're late again, which is negative, we would just look at the virtues chart and say, okay, which virtue is missing today? Which one have you forgotten about? We'd look down, it would be reliability. And the next time when the student came, they'd say, oh, I'm really sorry, I forgot my reliability, which is a much more positive thing to look. Whereas I think that many of us in this Zoom room, we were used to the model of, oh, you're late, negative, you're a bad person. But with the virtues, you acknowledge when things, you know, are not good, but you look at which virtue is missing at that particular time. And then and as Geoff said, when they practice a virtue, rather than just saying, well done, you can't always name what they've done. Is it compassion? Is it kindness? Is it self-discipline? But you soon get used to it. If you have that chart in front of you, and you can download these virtues from the internet, by the way, you can easily get a chart, put it on your fridge at home, and then you can start using the language at home. And as Geoff said, it works. I mean, initially, I wanted it, you know, I wanted this method to use with the students. And even the roughest, toughest 19-year-old boy coming down the corridor, when we'd done like a virtuous session, he would say, oh, Phil, I remembered my respect last week, you know, that sort of thing. And it's all about, you know, for anyone who thinks it might sound complicated, the virtues, it's all about just weaving it into everyday life. It's not an add-on. It's like we were saying, whether it's a maths lesson or an English lesson, you can say, well, you practice excellence today. You're compassionate, you're kind. It's weaving it into everything else. And in the end, at my work, with members of staff, the teachers, we ended up using the language of virtue between ourselves, you know. And I noticed on my last performance management, actually, that my boss actually ended up using rather than saying, you know, whether my lesson was good or bad, she said, well, it was a challenging situation. You used good determination. And I thought, gosh, that's amazing. Even my boss is the language of the virtues now. So it's much more of having an awareness, you know, as Geoff is saying, these gems are within, but to pull them out, it's to use the language of the virtues. And we, as adults, we often want to fix problems for our children. That's a very natural thing to want to do, but you can't fix it. But what you can do is pull out, acknowledge that virtue within so that they are able to fix it for themselves. And then that's much more long lasting, you know, that's sort of a permanent way of fixing it. There you go, gems within.
Okay, so I'm going to just share, I've got a sense that we're kind of starting to head towards the end. So I thought I'd just briefly share some websites that might be of help. So this is my website, The Gems Within, and it's got some information on resources that I have available. So my character education curriculum there is available from Birmingham University. It's available as a free download now, so you'll have to print it off yourself. And then my book on the Star Awards program for primary schools is there. That's really a school resource, really. And also if you like the little film that I showed, it's just there. So you know, if you wanted to share it with anybody, so there's the website. It's gemswithin.co.uk. I did put it in the chat. I'll put it up again if you like. And then, of course, the Virtues Project internationally has a new website now. It's been a long time in the making. So virtuesproject.com, you know, make a note of that. It's a lovely website, and you can explore a little bit about the virtues by doing a virtues card pick here. It'll automatically give you a virtues card for you to reflect on there, and it'll tell you about the 5 strategies of the Virtues Project here, which are all laid out. I mean, I haven't talked about the 5 strategies. We've just been talking about speaking the language of virtues, and of course you can recognize teachable moments, you can set clear boundaries and honor the spirit. And Philomene was briefly talking about companioning there, not trying to fix people, but listen anyway. The Virtues Project, lovely website. Now, brand new on the scene is a company called Virtues Matter, which is run by 2 friends of mine, and this is actually an app. You can download it onto your phone. It's free, and it will give you a set of virtues cards. Well, you get a free collection of cards, and the idea is that you buy a set of cards for it. It's about $2, you know, £1.50, something like that. You can buy the adult reflection cards. You can buy the Virtues Educators cards for schools, and you can use it on an iPhone or an Android phone, and I think it will work for iPads as well. So very cheap, very easy to use, and it gives you a set of lovely virtues cards that you can reflect on each day, and it's got videos on there that you can watch and learn a bit more about the Virtues Project and its application in education and welfare in the States. So those are those 3 sites: the virtuesproject.com, virtuesmatter.org, and my website, thegemswithin.co.uk. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, can I say a huge thank you, Geoff? That was amazing. Thank you so much. And can I suggest that we ask you back, because I feel that like an iceberg, we've only touched the tip of it, and as we know, an iceberg goes down 10 times and under the water, so there's a lot more. Perhaps maybe on the 5 strategies, Geoff, something very practical with exercises that might be interesting if you were all keen to do that, and you know, to bring along other friends and other educators.
So, Kath,
can I just? It just occurred to me as well that by naming virtues to somebody and saying you know you need to practice, you're lacking reliability, that kind of thing, it means that you're not condemning them. You're not saying they are bad. You're just saying that they lack that particular virtue. And so it's not negative to your soul, your spirit, or whatever. It's enhancing rather than negative. Yeah.
Well, I can attest to this, because if ever we're late to go somewhere, and I feel Michaela is making us, this is my wife, Michaela is making us late. When I say to her, Michaela, you need to improve your punctuality, it always goes down really well, as you can imagine. No, joking aside, absolutely. Yeah, that's the great thing, isn't it? You know, when I was a teacher in my early days, if a child was telling a blatant lie about something, you know, the old school way would be something like, I won't have you lying to me. I won't have you lie. You know, that would be that approach. And then next day you get a very angry parent coming and say, my little Tommy doesn't lie. You know, and of course, you know, most children go through a phase of, you know, telling lies,
denying things,
because it's great. It gets you off scot-free. It's a natural part of human development, you know. And so the great thing was the virtues projects. You know, when here's a typical scenario. You know, you're in school, somebody's flooded the sinks, you know, and Fred's just outside, all Rufkin's outside, and you say, you know, I'd really appreciate you telling me the truth about what's happened here, you know, Fred, you know, or you know, somebody's flooded the toilets, you know. Who's gonna have the courage to practice truthfulness and you know, own up to it? So it's a very difficult approach. So, you know, when Freddie goes home to his dad and says, Mr. Smith asked me to practice truthfulness today, it goes down a lot better than Mr. Smith said I was lying. You know? So that's a very small way in which virtues keeps you very safe, you know. And of course, you know, that's exactly what Kath said. It's not us, you know. You know, it's the virtues that we're practicing, and some days we get it right, and some days we get it wrong, and of course, you know, the wonderful thing is we could be detached from, you know, what our actions were on that day or lack of virtues, and we can try again the next day. So, you know, with a child, I could say, you know, perhaps Fred has you know, not had a great day because he's broken some equipment. You know, I can say, Fred, you know, today you didn't practice caring with the equipment. What are you going to do differently tomorrow? And hopefully Fred will say, well, Mr. Smith, I'm going to be more caring with the equipment, or I'm going to give the school equipment more respect tomorrow. So we can focus on, you know, where we're going, what's going to be better, what we're going to do. Sorry, I'm going on too much. Thank you.
Yeah. No, the examples are fantastic. So that's really helps.
Yeah. And yeah, sorry, Bev. Yeah, Bev has a comment, and yeah, just to say, Kathy, it's so positive because it, you know, the virtues are not something that we just are. It's something that's always developing and changing, and it's what Abdul Baha said. You know, be better. Let the next day be better than yesterday. It's each day we try. You know, and it's not personal to the person. It's either presence or absence of virtue. Sorry, Bev.
It's a skill. It's a skill, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to add that if you're introducing the virtues to a group and it's new, rather than overwhelming them, maybe just choose 20. Because, you know, I panicked initially when I saw 100 different virtues. They overlap. Then there were 54. And I kept saying to Geoff, can we narrow this down, please? Can we, you know, and then just choosing 20 core ones made it easier, more, you know, much easier. And I think that's one of the things that we do. If we just keep it, I like simples. So if we keep it simple, and then that's it. And then we can grow and layer and layer and layer. That's all I wanted to say.
I'm going to finish off with a story, if that's okay. A little story, a little bedtime story for everybody. Is that okay? So this story is about a friend of mine who's who started to practice the virtues, and she was with her little son, and she'd been talking to him about courage, I think, you know, practicing his courage. And we're talking about I think he was 5 years old, 6 years old, something like this. Now, my friend lived in a big Victorian house, you know, with like literally 4 stories, and they had an office. I think it was on the 3rd or 4th floor, and the little boy called Logan was afraid of going up to the office. You know, I think he thought there was a ghost there, and it was a big old creaky Victorian house. Anyway, they were downstairs one day, and his mum thought she'd give Logan a little test, and she said, Logan, could you practice your courage and go upstairs and get Mummy's teacup that she's left up there? And you know, Logan, being a thoughtful little boy, he said, well, I'd like to practice courage, but Mum, I left my courage at school, and so I won't be able to do that. And then he thought, and he must have thought better about it. He went to the back door, he opened the back door, and he shouted, shouted over to where his school was, "Courage, come here!" and he kind of almost kind of embraced this invisible courage into his chest like that. And then he went upstairs and he got the teacup and he brought it downstairs again. So that was an amazing story of a child so young, but with that kind of thinking about, think of all the kind of what's going on in his little mind, and the fact that he's calling on courage and bringing it into him. It's something he can choose to use, not something he's limited with or handicapped by. I always thought that was a really amazing example. So it's been a pleasure to talk to everybody. Lovely to see you all. And I hope you have a lovely evening. And of course, if we could do this again, it would be perhaps when Bev and I could present one together, or maybe even with Phil as well, because Phil, of course, is very experienced with virtues. But if you, if you have a group that you want me to talk to do this talk, I can do this talk again. If you have a group of people that you have that would like to hear it, I'm more than happy to do it again.
Thanks again, Geoff. Thank you.
Thank you, Geoff.